Our offices are next to each other, so we're battling about.
What do you do? I'm the township manager.
I'm the director of operations for the township.
So, when I'm Nicole,
Renee?
Renee. Mr. May was right back there. Yeah, I see, yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Renee. How you doing? How are you? Good.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, I didn't bring anything.
Oh,
How are you?
oh, that's your chief. Okay.
Shall I write down some names? You probably know where.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But there's nothing about my block that's a historic block, but then my house is built.
I might be biased. Oh, okay. Take the opposite. It's fine. So about this, I worked in the office of environment. It covers the environment department and then there's special services. Landlord's production. But I actually work a lot with the BPA, whenever they, BRA, now BPA. Yes. Development. Right, because I lived right on the Boston Brookline town line, so in Brookline, getting all of the advantages of the replenishment that I had. Brookline schools, Brookline fire, Brookline police, didn't have to put up with the Boston schools. We had no parking overnight, so we had our stuff was a problem. But there was a couple gas stations right over the town line that are now being redeveloped, and that was a long process, finding that not stories. Yeah. Not be thousands of units, and ended up with 150 costs. But we get to know people. Yep, we're recording and we have our sound up. Can you hear us all right on the phone?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, I think we'll get started, and if other folks come in, they will obviously join in the conversation, but just for the sake of time and to respect everyone's evening, we will jump in. So we first wanted to start off with introductions to know who's around the table and on the line. So I'll start. My name is Hannah Clark. I am a urban planner with Michael Baker International. We are working with the township to help facilitate these working group meetings. So you'll be seeing a lot of me and my colleague Chris as the facilitators, obviously working very closely with community development, Dave Manhart and Greg Adams, and then obviously we have other folks here from the township who will introduce themselves as well, and I'll hand it off to Renee if you want to go first. Renee Whitehall Township Manager.
Randy Cope, Director of Township Operations. I oversee the Public Works Department and Parks and Rec Department.
Thank you. And Robert?
Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Emanuel. I am a graduate planning student at Temple University, and I'm currently interning for Southwest Health.
You know?
Okay, my name is Marsha Armstrong. I'm a regular. I've been here just over a year. I applied for a beautiful place to live. There's a lot of stuff for like what can I do as a resident? Maintain the quality of life.
Michelle Sheridan. I too am a transplant. I'm originally from Whitehall and Holocaust. I've
been in Whitehall Township for, geez, probably 30 years now. Do you want to observe days and stem growth that's starting to explode? Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Commissioner Mike Walk. I was sworn into office January 2020. Are you put out as a citizen advocate for growth and development and preservation? I'm assigned as the commissioner on the Land Preservation Committee, which went inactive during the pandemic, but we hope to get that reactivated. Sure.
And then our other person on the line, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and also let us know how the audio has been for you. Would you like to introduce yourself on the line? Okay. All right, then if you can always feel free to drop into the chat if the audio is not working for you. So with that, we will kick things off. And again, thank you so much for your time this evening. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording this meeting because we want to have a resource for those who could not make it tonight, to be able to, or maybe are attending a housing session, to be able to engage and participate in that way. And so I'm going to just briefly walk us through the workbook that I think you have, like all your notes. So like I got exactly what it's for. This is really our roadmap for how we're going to be approaching the working group over the next few weeks. And again, we took this approach and working with Dave and Greg to have it be, pretty quick moving because we wanted to keep things fresh. We wanted to make sure that the ideas that were discussed were then advanced to the next steps of the working group. So just really appreciative of your time and commitment and being a part of this process. And also want to say that we're seeing this as the public input piece of the working group recommendation. So obviously, we know we're all coming from different places in the township. I know we have one of our board of commissioners here. We have a lot of planning commission members participating, and we really think everyone's wearing their resident hat in these sessions so that we can have an open and free-flowing discussion, because we do know obviously that planning commission and COC will have a good amount of input and be directing this forward after these working group sessions. So just to introduce you to the workbook, if you have not had a chance to page through it, but just very briefly, the first section is just introducing and providing a framework for how we'll be approaching this. You can see the timeline on page 2. Just a reminder, next week is the week where we'll be working with the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. We will have Becky Bradley in resource protection, as well as, I believe, Jeff Reed. So they will be really wealth of knowledge for us to help facilitate some of the discussion around the many aspects of resource protection that this working group covers. And then in August, we'll be building out the recommendations and presenting them to the Planning Commission by mid-August. The working group resources on page 3 are really just a summary of some of the things we'll be referencing in the book. If you visited the subpage for resource protection on the South Whitehall website, all of these resources are there. We also want to ensure that we're adding to this as relevant to specific working groups. So as we're discussing this evening, we might identify some other resources, and we'll make sure to add them to this. Then the next page, page 4, is just the contact information for those leading this work. Steve Manhart and Greg Adams are both with South Whitehall Township. Myself and my colleague Chris, as I mentioned, are here as facilitators and making sure that we can help support this and move it forward and capture all the great work that's going to happen. Page 5 are the guiding principles of the comprehensive plan update. These were established when the plan update kicked off. So they're just here to keep in mind and refer back to as we discuss specific recommendations. Then on page 6, we wanted to highlight that this process is a required process by the state municipal planning code. The MPC requires communities to update their comprehensive plans every 10 years, and you can read here everything that's a part of that. So just grounding us in why we're doing this and why we're doing it along this timeline. The next page is from an exercise we did when we kicked off phase 4 at the end of March of this year. And we asked folks to give us idea or words of what would you use to describe South Whitehall today? And we had words like diverse, opportunity, growing, beautiful. We also saw overwhelmed, congested. So, there's definitely different viewpoints and ways that people see the township today. And when we go to the next page, where's the township in the future, we see things, trails, opportunity, exciting, open space, diverse. And the way that these word clouds work is when someone puts a word more than once, it's bigger. So these are some of the words that rose to the top for where do we want to see the township go for the next 10 years. And then the next section is called framing concepts. And it's part of our intro meeting on June 29th. Would have been seeing the presentations given by Dave Manhart about the South Whitehall growth and future land use exercise that was done. You would also have heard from Todd Poole on the economic development scenario. And finally, Keystone Consulting Engineers on the transportation model. So we're referencing these because these are a wealth of information that we're not going to dive into in depth during our session, because we did that in our intro, and you can access the full presentations and reports from these folks on the website, and you can make sure it's on in the resources page at southwhitehall.com/plan, COMPPLAN. And then, so they're just brief summaries in the following pages of the where should we grow survey and report, and then the how we should grow survey and report are all available and in more detail on the website. Okay, similarly with the economic development scenario, this is a brief overview of how it was conducted. So basically the results of the how should we grow were put into an economic development model and show this is what growth would look like if we grew in a way that was a result of the survey. And then again, transportation, again, took those results from how should we grow and put it into a transportation model. It should be noted that both these models anticipated a full build out, which is not realistic, and was said by both folks at market dynamics and all the different things that we know affect development are likely to not see the full scenario realized. But they provide us with a sense of what the future could be in a round of development that it could happen, particularly when we think about commercial, industrial, and residential all together. So with that, we land on today, page 17. We are in the existing conditions meeting for resource protection, and we're going to talk a bit about the 2009 comp plan. That was the last time the township updated the comprehensive plan, so we'll be referencing a lot of those resources here. They had a lot on resource protection, which many of you are aware of. So then the goals today, we're going to have so they're going to help also provide context to that's what we learned in 2009, where are we today, and then start directing us to, based on the feedback and discussion we have, where do we want to start directing the recommendation for the comprehensive plan update. So today is about assessing where we are, looking back a bit on the 2009 plan, because that is the basis for the update, and then really having a robust discussion. So it's exciting because we've been doing these virtually the past 2 days. This is my first in-person meeting in a very long time, so I'm very excited to be here. I love the in-person opportunities that we have to connect. So we're going to keep it very dynamic. and very conversational. So promise after these first, this grounding, you will very much have a back and forth. So it did look like another person joined us on the line. Can you hear us? If you have any trouble with audio, just do drop it into the chat. All right, so we're going to jump into the existing conditions pages unless is there a question? Anyone has a question? Okay, so page 18 has how the NPC defines resource protection. And it requires that comprehensive plans address resource protection in this context. So protection of natural and historic resources to the extent not preempted by federal or state law. It includes, but is not limited to, wetlands and aquifer recharge zones, woodlands, steep slopes, prime agricultural land, floodplains, unique natural areas, and historic sites. So quite a lot there. We will see when we go to the next page. In 2009, there were some big goal statements about where South Whitehall wanted to head when we thought about protection of natural, historic, and agricultural resources. And comprehensive plans are really a visionary document. So the goal statements are often broad, and sometimes it's, especially in plans from the 2009, 2010. You're seeing a lot of broad statements, and then so sometimes we have to assess if and how things got done. And what's great is we have Randy and Renee here to, I think Randy was going to very briefly speak to, when we look at what these 15 goals were in 2009, kind of where we landed at, where we are today, because when we are thinking about our recommendations, these will be really helpful to assess. Is this the direction we want to continue in? Do we want to evaluate where we've had success and where we want to build on? So, Randy, do you want to just give folks an update as to?
Do you want me to go through one by one?
I don't think one by one. I think we were thinking.
Yeah, there's some definitely good things that I've been in 2014. But number one here sticks out to me. We just recently did a project Covered Bridge Park, and it was unique in the sense that the developer of the warehouses over on Tractor Support Road was required to do so many riparian buffer plantings. They did not have the location at their site to do it, so they reached out to the Lehigh County Conservation District and asked for some insight. Conservation District said, try contacting the township. They might be interested in restoring some riparian buffers through Covered Bridge Park. So we worked with them and happy to announce we planted, I believe, nearly 7 acres of riparian buffers, over 3,100 trees down near Covered Bridge Park. And that does not include all the plantings we did for the Jordan Creek Greenway in a very similar, or the exact same section between Wormill Road and Route 309. So that was one of the buffers. And then there was 3 others throughout Covered Bridge Park as well that we were able to plant with the assistance from the warehouse. So the unique part about this too is that they're actually responsible for maintaining these riparian buffers in perpetuity. It actually is recorded into the deed and it runs with the deed. So if there's something, if it's not up to our standards, if it's failing, a flood comes through, they're responsible to come in and actually restore the buffer again.
So all those baby trees along the walkway. So
What is it?
while the walk, the trail was some of it, not a third, but down River Road further. And then if you're coming into Covered Bridge, before you come to the main entrance, the left. Coming, going towards the bridge to the left, you'll see that along.
You're talking down by the boardwalk section of the trail?
The boardwalk section was more of our planning from the trail.
No, there's about 4 acres there as well.
Okay, up
That's
the
the
very
warehouse.
bottom.
That's the buffer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're
And down-
actually,
yeah.
they're doing some maintenance on the one on River Road right now because they didn't do it properly the first time. So I had to call them back and tell them to come and cut down the giant ragweed that grew. So they're actually down there the past 2 days getting that cleaned up.
Just clarification, who's responsible for coming back?
The developer.
The developer.
The developer.
The warehouse developers,
Yes.
and they actually do the work?
Yep.
It's not just funded.
Well,
Well, they can farm it out
They
to the
can
third
contract.
party,
Yeah.
contract, but they're responsible for the planting, care, and the.
Okay.
Win-win.
Correct, because they didn't have, yeah.
So kudos to the Conservation District for thinking of us. We were happy to work with them, but we wanted to make sure we were protected and
And flood control there in the spring.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
that's what it is.
Sometimes we have flood.
Hurricane or tropical, one I can't pronounce. Another interesting thing too that we've done with resource protection is, a lot of people don't think of steep slopes as a very beneficial piece of property to preserve, but we in fact did do that up at Kohler Ridge, off of Brickyard Road in Huckleberry right there. Actually, through the Hills of Winchester development here, the developer dedicated 9.8 acres of property for the township as part of their requirements through township ordinances. And just so happened, the adjoining 15, almost 16 acres was also for sale. So we were able to purchase that as well. So it's all of wood. It's a really unique property. In fact, we're going through a master plan phase right now, getting a ton of public input, but it's a unique property in the sense that you have a steep wooded hillside that leads down into a very natural meadow. So you have two different, ecosystems there that is very unique and not something you see a lot of in the area. So that was a great opportunity for us to not just preserve the land, but it's also great for water quality. There was I believe maybe 10 years ago, there was a development plan for that. And it didn't work out, but we were thankful to be able to have the opportunity to go in there and scoop it up.
And it's good to go walking up there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, and it would be really, really nice once we,
yeah.
I mean, it's nice now. It's a hike.
It's got some.
Unique characteristics.
When it's designed, we'll make sure to have walking paths for all levels of however.
Yeah.
There'll be some more difficult trails and some more things that.
Yeah, we hiked it a few times.
Kudos to previous administrations for doing what they did at Covered Bridge Park. That falls directly in line with this. This is pre-2009. But the state actually, every time they're down at Covered Bridge Park for the PCNR, they said the township did it right. And what they mean by that is preserving the floodplain, creating a park, usable space for recreation, passive recreation, active recreation. And the township had the ability to do that, I believe, back in the 80s or early 90s. But it's been a tremendous park down there for our residents and visitors. And that's what the state likes to see. That's why you see it in these guidelines, they protect these areas that, are really crucial, like the floodways, your steep slopes and things like that. So the covered bridges, we don't own. They are owned by Lehigh County, but we work frequently with them on trying to get them reopened. It's pretty back sensitive. What else is on here?
I would also say historic preservation. We did a little bit with that.
Yep.
King
Georgian, yeah, historical. We frequently discuss with Wildlands Conservancy. We've had presentations from Lehigh County about their programs that they offer for preservation. Trying to go through some of this other stuff.
I think what's really helpful here, hearing from Randy and Renee, is that understanding what has worked well and what has come out of that. And I think when we start to think about recommendations or what we can build on, how and what is here be, enhanced, or where we see the priority for the next step. So it's super, super helpful. Is there any final things here you want to add in, or yeah?
EAC, looks like one of the recommendations here in 09 was to activate the EAC. We did a GAC, which we call GAC. Similar in nature, not the exact same bylaws and mission statement, but they are trying to tackle things. They're very big on recycling, community outreach, education for the residents about best practices and things like that. Stormwater is a big thing for that group as well. So
It's participation. It's totally active for 2 months.
yeah,
And we decided, since we were focused on funding, and the pandemic was impacting funds, just to put it on hold.
but we were actively trying to accomplish another goal here.
Mhm.
We were working towards that and trying to get think we were getting to a point where we were looking at referendum language, you know, to see if the public had an interest in doing it. And, yeah, we were off and running, and then that's the end of it.
And all of the other tax related funding that you have to be available.
Yeah, there's tons of state grants out there. I shouldn't say. It's not
I
like
was
they're
gonna say, 'cause they're
just
not-
pick them off a tree. But yeah, they are competitive, but there are land acquisition opportunities out there through DCNR, DCED, I believe, has a program. Lehigh County has
And I
facilities.
think Lehigh County does a great job. They have a department. So I'm going out and talking to farmers. To educate them.
I have a question not about preservation, but the work. I'm just curious, did our staff prepare this or did Michael Baker prepare this?
This was, I believe it was prepared by Timothy Pettis,
Oh, okay, all right.
with staff and,
I mean, yeah, like these are goals out of the last one, so they pulled pieces of the prior.
oh, this, sorry, this workbook. was prepared by-
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
you know, with pieces of the things that have.
Are pulled directly from the,
Yeah. But these goals, like on page 19, are directed from the
Yeah.
2000.
2009, yeah.
just kind of reviewing
Yeah.
what is covered and what some of the existing goals, bridge recommendations. So if it's all right, I'm just going to move us into just, because we want to have plenty of time for us to get into discussion. I think we'll hear a lot more as we discuss. So we've included some of the maps from the comprehensive plan. The first one is the historic resources. I do recognize that it's not the most legible in its format. So, which is why it's run a PDF, so you can zoom in there, but, so, and that's why it's great if you have the 11 by 17. And this,
You got the special edition,
Okay,
I know, you're like, what?
what I did find is but there's a legend on the next page.
Yeah, that's what you did.
22 tells you all the stuff. Yes, and now, yeah, so it's more, I think, to give you a sense of where they are. The historic preservation recommendations, so this is really taking those goals and starting to put some meat to those goals, some actions. We're not going to go through them one by one, but we kind of look back to them as we're thinking through where we want to go next and where we are today. And obviously, if there are questions. The official map on page 22, which you just referred to, was the tool that came out of the 2009 comprehensive plan. So the official map is a standalone resource, you know, that is put forward by the municipal planning code to basically assist municipalities in where do we want to see preservation, where do we want to direct development, where are key areas when it comes to historical parks. So the official map has a lot of different uses, and you can see that South Whitehall decided to incorporate historic sites and structures to prioritize where these are and to also make sure those are in the map that's considered when you're looking at any type of change. If you're looking at a parkland acquisition, if you're looking to build something. So official maps are a very strong tool, and it's something that can be a result of the updated version. The next page 23 is the natural resources, and again, you're going to see that we have the 100-year floodplain, and in purple, it shows the steep slope, like what Randy was discussing, particularly in the upper right, excuse me, left-hand corner of the county. So, excuse me, township. Getting my words all mixed up. But so basically this was again the assessment, and with natural resources, unlike maybe some other areas, I think has stayed to stay pretty similar.
Yeah.
And so then we look,
There's a couple
Oh.
of questions. but-
yeah. Oh, of course, with the. So then the next page on page 24, again, for your reference, to think about the different floodplains, floodways, wetlands, 100-year floodplains that exist in the township. And also, I think that obviously speaks very strongly to the riparian buffer work that's how important that is. The next page 25, and I'm going through these quickly because these are resources we can dive into in depth or have already done so. So we want to but just why they're showing up here, the natural resource recommendations in terms of the goals for natural resources in that goal statement, these again filled them out into more detail. And again, I assume that Randy, these are some of what allowed some of the successes you were talking about since 2009. The prime agricultural soils, understanding the soil class, and how that relates to resource protection and preservation. You can see on page 27 the agricultural preservation considerations that are in the 2009 plan. And then when we go to page 28, we're seeing the official map again, this time looking at how they highlighted environmental features, including geology, slopes again, woodland, lakes and ponds. So another way of looking at natural resources, particularly, and the importance of having it on the official map to really institutionalize where these things are located. The final piece we have on page 29 is actually from the 2019 Existing Conditions Report that was published by Dave Manhart with as part of the township when the comprehensive plan update was initially discussed. And so this just talks about land cover. And you can, look through the legend, and then you see that, we're seeing almost 50% of a low vegetation land cover in South Whitehall. And I think in our discussions, we can see what that means. So the last thing before we go into our discussion portion is similar to the work slide you saw about generally South Whitehall. These were the words that people put forward when we asked, how would you describe resource protection today? And again, the larger the word, the more times people used it. So opportunity, there was, someone said poor, someone said not enough, a needs direction. So I think there are some mandates here that we can discuss how that translates into the work and recommendations that this group, working group will be pursuing. And so with that, I think if you take a couple minutes for clarifying questions on the existing conditions, if you would like, but we really do want to jump into our discussion because Randy and Renee will really be a resource to help flesh out a lot of what we discussed as well. So I don't know if there are any clarifying questions on the existing conditions aspect or what was presented here, or everyone good? All right, then we get to use our Post-its and our pens. And and the colors don't mean anything. We're going to do a prioritization exercise for the next meeting. So right now, it's just whatever color speaks to you. The orange is speaking to you, the brown. So the first piece of information and discussion we want to have is in terms of what was presented in the existing conditions and what you've heard in terms of the update, what feels significant as we move forward with making recommendations. And if you want to write it down, and Robert will come around and collect it and put it up there, and then we'll kind of see where our group's at. If you'd like me to write it down, I'm happy to do that as well if you don't feel like writing. So, but if you want to take, a minute or so and write some thoughts down, and then we'll see where we land. Yeah. Okay, we talked about all stuff, but is there money to do things with? Well, it depends. I mean, there's grants, there's county programs. So township dedicated? Yes. That's where we were with farmland preservation, was looking at referendum language to specifically create additional funds for that. So you could we do not currently set aside for farmland preservation. You could do that via taxes. You could do that via putting a percentage of the budget to it.
So I mean, using that, if that question fits this exercise, would a question be, I need more data on sources of funding for preservation?
That's exactly where we're headed.
we were able to purchase the land that we purchased, 16 acres, through the general fund. So we did that as an expense of the general fund, which we opportunity was, we looked to finance at that point of time.
That's the Coleman Ridge.
That's Kohler Ridge, yeah. I mean, it takes some negotiating, but yeah, it was through general fund.
In a way, I'm just going to read what they said. The committee reform was specifically looking at funding sources. We're looking at what's the total amount of sources available for raising taxes. And then over here, we were considering recommending people's opinion of whether we wanted to increase the IP or earn income tax. So we're looking at non-tax and tax sources. And we're pulling that information together.
So anything we do here is really, it's kind of like a pie in the sky because there's no money to support any of the things.
If I may just speak to, not on behalf of the township, but what comprehensive plans allow municipalities to do is they provide the vision that you use in the grant application, and it makes it a much more realistic project for someone like DCNR, the conservation. With the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Natural Resources.
Okay.
Sorry.
So those are the state, they're state-run agencies. So they provide a great deal of grant funding. So, you know, if there's a particular, say there's a particular preservation project or I don't know, some kind of project that fits into the definition of a DCNR grant. It fits into your comprehensive plan. You go after that, you apply for it with the DCNR. And then they provide funding for it. Sometimes there's matching grants, which is where we have open space. So anytime a developer comes in, they have to pay an open space fee. Which is a calculation, kind of the lower calculation, we're looking to update that from a fee perspective. So that open space money sits separate. So we use that for matching grants, trail, that kind of stuff. So there is that. So anytime a development comes in, there is an open space fee associated with. And sometimes that there can be a space that development can provide internally. So then it's not necessarily money up to the township for the open space fund. But that's an opportunity to utilize those funds as well.
I sort of look at it this way. 25 people voting on this eventually. Where we're at in the process, right? We're engaging citizens. You should tell us what you think you want to see in the township. And yes, indeed, things have to be funded. All these things have to fund whatever they come on. I would suggest that you don't put limitations on it. It may seem that way, but if you and enough citizens say, this is what I want, well, then the staff and the board is going to take that seriously. And I can tell you, staff and the board is inclined to preservation. So
So what, so who does a good job on preservation in the valley? Like just,
Well, the dynamics are different between everybody with preservation, so you have to consider that. There are some more rural areas of the valley that probably have more preservation than South Whitehall. But when, you know, South Whitehall borders the third largest city in the state of PA, so sometimes that dynamic is challenging. And so there are some other communities that do have more preserves. But again, you know, when we talk about, you know, there's open space preservation, there's farmland preservation, there's multiple different layers of that. And unfortunately, sometimes it's up to the landowner. So it's not just like you know, we go out and we say, hey, you know, we're very interested. There's a lot of conversations that occur with that because it's a sensitive subject to people. So, yeah.
I think, if you wanted to know information about specific farmland preservation, I know you.
Lehigh County.
Yeah, border,
They have,
there's a list. And what I said, municipalities in the northwest are largely rural. They have like 4 of the most acres. But we have a neighboring township, Loma Country, it's like nearly 1,000. They have similar characteristics of what we have.
And I would imagine, especially because I think some of the discussion today is thinking about what information do we really want to elevate them to understand more? So one of the things we said was funding and where are the funding sources? So that will help us, you know, when we get to our 3rd meeting, where if you look ahead, we're going to be building out recommendations that ask us, where is the funding? Who's going to lead it? So understanding where we are today, and I guess if there's some pieces that we can build out, because next week we have LPC here that works with the 62 municipalities across, you know, the Lehigh Valley. They can also give a perspective from their regional perspective, understand how the township fits into this environment of the Lehigh Valley and, you know, what opportunities there are. Would you agree with that? So I don't know if there's other, and you know, we have these questions and we're asking every working group for the same types of questions because we want to get a good baseline of where we're at in each topic. So are other pieces of information feeling, and what did you read what you put up there?
Randy, what did I just write? I'm saying it's not that good. These up Whitehall Park master plan.
We're working on it. So this one.
And I guess, or are there things that you heard about that Randy or Renee were talking about that stuck out? Funding piece, what stuck out to me is just someone who's thinking about it from the planning perspective is what land development controls do you currently have that have allowed you to get acres of, you know, conserved space? Would that be something that is of interest? You know,
What are your, since you're the 2 citizens here, what are your
well,
primary?
really, Mike, you're not.
I know, I'm here as a citizen, but I don't want to, I'll speak in a little bit. Since you're covered, so to speak, what are your main interests? I've done a lot of work around farming, but I don't want to burden everybody with farmland. What, it seems like you have broader interests.
I think I heard you say historic, landmark, historic preservation.
I have a lot of historic in my own personal history, a lot of interest in historical preservation, a lot of experience in cities. But also the other parts of historical preservation, how do you make sure that whatever's out there in the countryside, if you will, is preserved? Because it's very possible, I mean, I have seen people in Boston come through and raise which is no historic preservation. So
have you done any information seeking on the house that is the historic houses? I mean, have you done any on the Jarris Corporation with it?
I read something about it. I mean, I have heard of that. Because there are a number of houses like that, the Dove House. You go there and say, gee, that's the house. How can you preserve it, and how can you make sure that there's a 5-story apartment?
Right. And I think those are dialogues that I think are important in the historic. And, we know of landowners who have a lot of the historic sites. And so there's conversations around how do you incorporate them into, sure, how do you incorporate Jordan Creek Greenway with those historic areas and that type of thing.
One thing is intriguing, drive up, there's a house
can't really see the house. No, it's there. Salvaggio or something? Oh, Salvaggio, yeah. And we have this big thing. I mean, it's like a huge mansion, and you can't go on the ground, so you can't go and explore it. But there's something very interesting there. And that is a property I think that could be anywhere right. They decided they wanted to go, except one, you know, a region except Whitehall, they could build it there, it's right next to it. And you could change everything. There's a beautiful barn on the other side of the retreat. It's all sorts of things that make it nice to be here. The fact that the Savages have that nice piece of property means that the top of the Regency is beautiful. There are no houses there, there's nothing oversupplied, and the sunset. I wanted to clear the sunset.
Well, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, when we first looked at Cola Ridge property, you know, that was part of it. You stand at the top of the hills up at the Cola Ridge, you know, it's a beautiful view. It's a view of the area that you can't get anywhere else. So that was one of the things that when we, I'm just seeing it, yeah, when we walked that area, when we stood up there, it's like, wow, this is something that's really impressive, and we were glad we were able to obtain that. And so it's definitely, yeah, the scenic views, definitely. Wonderful.
And the other thing I think we start on preservation of historic things, and because we talked with the Jerry's house, is that Seacrest, and that land is major rich farm development that needs to be done. But there's this little beautiful stuff to preserve there. And then going into all of that, Allen, then pulling it up with and it's like, okay, it's like a different world. How do you look at that? Turn it as to quality of life. I don't know. I mean, it's really nice. I get that.
I was writing them all down, huh?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a runner, I bike, you know, so rails, trails, they're important. I also have grandchildren, so, you know, parks, you know, we do covered bridge park, which is really cool. So, you know, the boys like to do that, so more parks are great, but they also love to go down to, Lehigh Valley Parkway and just explore too, so like open space. But I also live right down here in Springhouse Farm, so that rich music park retreat is like devastating to me. Like all of that being built up, and all of those cars are being, yeah, well, the park, yeah, both of them. I'm gonna be smushed.
You're talking about that.
No, back there, but she was talking about Rich Farm. Rich Farm. And
Rich Farm.
I got Rich Farm and one and Parkview, the other. I'm gonna be smushed back there. And part of what I love is, you know, boys and I take my dog for a walk in the neighborhood. I'm not gonna be able to do that. So, part. Bringing a 5-year-old? You know, side of the road. I don't know, keep to the side of the road. All that traffic congestion, so I'm really nervous about like how things are gonna get built up. And they reuse existing buildings, but can't change the fabric of neighborhood either. People that are living here. Part of the reason it's where I live
And only, and street at one end.
I feel like we're kind of moving into the second question, which is why these topics are important. One thing I just thought from your company two is walkability and safety. Yeah, exactly. And then the importance of the neighborhood fabric that's there right now. So maybe those can go under number two. So other, I guess we don't need, we can expand it because we know you also, I think, what you're saying is being used, preserving quality of life. That also fits to bring us into why is this important.
I mean, I like to walk what your community target. Usually I draw my foot, it's like hard to walk to target and walk is worse. It's always dangerous to cross the street. And there's also sidewalks, you know, we talk about walkability, the trails, sidewalks that connect to things that we want to walk to, but is important.
Can I put two?
Yes. Go ahead.
So, when our committee work left off, we next action item that's not related to funding directly was to identify land that was amenable for farmland preservation or agricultural preservation. So number one would be, complete that work. Then, complete why is it significant? South Whitehall Township has 0 agricultural zoning and 0 farmland reserve. Back to your question, where do I get that data? On agricultural farmland preservation, we haven't accomplished it. The purpose of this committee would, the actions. We do have one preserved farm. It's
We do have Anita Farm.
And then
But we do have agricultural. residential. Anita is on Cedar Crest.
And then their neighbors also have a guy.
Yeah, the miners kind of, I don't think you can see it from Cedar Crest. There's a little lane off of Huckleberry that has the ag easement over the back. Back,
So
yeah, it's a
what's
little lane.
an ag easement?
Might be able to answer this better than they have.
It's,
I don't know if there is an out.
It's preserved, the portion I thought preserved for the ability for.
Let's right. Since you mentioned it, I've been working on this for 3+ years, and it's a citizen now with the commissioner. I don't think it's ever come up. So
Well, it's on the thing, it's on the official.
It's on the-
It's on the official map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's hard to see.
It's-
I'll just make a mental note to.
Yeah, and we have to have agricultural. You have to, we do.
I don't think that's correct.
Well, there's no.
Well, you have to, one of the requirements of the for the
Well, residential,
you have
We do.
you have to accommodate for everything.
We do have zoning. With.
It's not called.
No, it's all residential.
All right, so let's just make a note. I'd like to learn more about that because for 3
Do you
years,
want the zoning for it?
I talked to Don White, who said South Whitehall has 0 agricultural zoning. And within all the township meetings for 3 years, we've said we have no agricultural.
Well, you said that, well, yes, because we do have, yeah.
I've sat in meetings with you where I said it and no one disagreed with me. So I kindly request you to tell me where South Whitehall has official agricultural zoning that's on our map. Because this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
According to the map, there's one dark green this reserve farm. She said.
Maybe,
So, for the sake of getting to all our questions, I'm just going to ask, are there other reason why this information is significant, either information we discussed or other priorities we have when we think about natural resources. Why is it significant? We have walkability, we have the importance of safety, we have, preserving our views, preserving sheds, preserving agricultural land, and thinking about where we can potentially expand. I don't know if there are other pieces we want to highlight here.
So, Mike, if you want to look at that, it falls into RR here. Residential and agricultural.
Right here.
So it wants-
We had county list, Southland, 0. On the right speaking committee, 0. All the conversations I've been involved with, townships. I don't know why they kind of. So I think we're talking two different things. I don't know why they wouldn't recognize it.
I don't know.
It's got to say-
Three different specific areas. So Mike, if you go under the zoning portal, I'll tell you
This
that.
one, like,
Let me just check out quick, okay, here's some. I am talking official act. So it's labeled R.
It's RR.
yeah.
Okay. I think we should go.
So this actually leads us very nicely into the next question.
So I don't know if they're talking about.
Very important.
Well, or maybe there's 4 or I don't know. We have 3 areas.
Let's conclude this like that.
So our next question, and our next area of focus. Where are we concerned here? We heard with water, here, right? Is that correct? What about, it can be intersections, it can be pieces of property. Well, it's just versus.
I was gonna say this one maybe. Randy's computer, you can turn it.
So so much of what we're talking about, obviously, is based in the natural geography and the way it's supposed to. So, yeah, I think the official map, I think it's the official map or, and I know we are going to about the tax to take the parents or the well, that's just in my neighborhood, like the 309, like corridor, that is. It's just, so some of these concerns are around traffic, busy, or, well, letting the, well, yes, because what's gonna happen, like, if, like, with the bridge farms or whatever, you the bridge, whatever, I mean, if you look at the impact studies, with the traffic, they had the traffic being impacted all the way down to, Bridgeview and 309 intersection. My intersection. Bridgeview, that's my intersection that I come out of where I live. They would have to add like another lane. That's Bridgeview. I mean, people that, when the traffic gets backed up on 309, they make that right-hand turn on Bridgeview, right there at Bulldog. Yeah, you cut off the traffic there. And then they make around up past, and take the back road by the high school. So that bridge view gets, backed up by me, people making that right-hand turn there. And if that, where the hotel is now, that were to go through, that would be a mess.
We don't know.
So when we bring this into into thinking about resource protection and thinking about natural resources, our water resources, our wetlands, our floodplain, historic resources, agricultural resources. Obviously, everything's related. We can't think of silent. So obviously there is the transportation woven into concerns around resource protection or priorities. So I think it's really important to think about those connections in this context. And I wonder what else maybe, if obviously there are some very large traffic impacts, but when we think about some of the other ways that natural resources or resource protection enhances quality of life here with our parks, farmland, with the riparian buffers, where are there certain areas that come to mind that you see an opportunity for preservation or for enhancement even? I mean, I think the riparian buffers is a great example of something that was enhanced through the work done. And again, just to kind of ground it, when we look at these maps from 2009 and the official map from 2010, the comprehensive plan is influencing why these things are updated. So particularly with the official map, I think there's ways that the resource protection group can say, we want to put forward recommendations, maybe speak directly to something that should be put on the official map or a way to utilize the official map, because these are tools that the comprehensive plan facilitates that then can be utilized in a variety of settings. I don't know, Randy and Renee, if you want to speak to that at all.
Good one.
The question I missed it.
So the question is just when we look at in our workshops, we have the official map, which was a product of the 2009 conference. So it makes sense when we're updating and thinking about this comprehensive plan. Are there opportunities for us to look at the official map and make some recommendations around the area of resource protection, or tie into other aspects of what's highlighted here, to see that be a priority within the comprehensive plan recommendations that gets reflected? Just one of the ways you can think about. And if you don't agree, please.
No.
Well, I think it's important.
And the one thing that really stands out to me is the woodlands. And when you look at it, we have them in the northern tier here, but it's kind of eye-opening when you look at it. And to think about the dynamic of the township, it feels like there's more out there, but then when we see it on the back, it's interesting.
Which page are you on?
It is true, these maps are not the easiest to read in this format. Sure, I'm jealous of it. Yeah, we were talking about it. But no, and then are there features that you could see being called out more strongly in the official document? Or I guess are there ways, at least based on work that you've been facilitating and things that could be reflected?
I think it's all there.
Yeah.
I think it's all there, so that.
I think it's all there. I think it's kind of defining where it is today.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine tuning it, making sure it's updated. Yeah. And it's an official map, a lot of them are pretty similar, in terms of what's actually, in the legend. So I'm just, when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking there's more woodlands than the township.
I would want to preserve woodlands that aren't there. I mean, would you pair me woodland?
You agree with their
Yeah, and buffers are pretty good.
Yeah.
You know,
because that's the goal of the repair buffers, provide a canopy.
Right.
So,
access to filter for the stream, it helps with, reduce flooding.
Yeah.
Filtering out the farm fields that, would actually, be sediment into the waterways. That's what it's there for. It's supposed to have the sponge, all those roots and everything. Filter it before it makes it into the waterway.
when you go with your street tree program. Street tree program. Canopy too.
I honestly believe conservation. It doesn't always have to be in the sense of farming, agricultural, corn and soybeans. I actually believe you can, I don't want to say timbering, it sounds horrible, but I think you can plant trees if it's harvested at a point in time. But when you're doing that, I mean, you have to harvest the trees until they reach, a level of maturity where it becomes unhealthy for the forest around it. So that could be an opportunity. I mean, if you, I think that's part of something that would be eligible, with some of these grant opportunities that are out there. I'd have to look.
What's interesting, in a way, you look at the environmental features map, is green over in the, to the western triangle.
Yep.
That's all.
Pretty steep up
It's
there.
very steep, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty low, but,
It is.
yeah. So it's not going to be subject to a lot of building.
Right.
But how can you actually? We have lots of. I'm,
I mean, we don't own it, so again, that's up to the landowner.
some of it's owned privately, there are private houses on it,
Sure.
and some of it's owned by the city is actually. Well,
One of the,
well, yeah, connected, but yeah, connected boundaries. Like where I live between Brookline and Boston, they did not put any part of that map, that building in Brookline. Yeah, we have, yeah.
you look at page 19, the last recommendation, and number 15 talks about purchase of development rights. So that's one thing the municipalities have been doing, to sell up or stock and actually purchase the development rights of the property. They don't necessarily require the land, but they're buying it so that it will not be built. That's a different, there's a bunch of different avenues.
No, that community development is working through this comp plan, so recommendation of TDRs.
Be a very important aspect of this group, given how it helps.
Only the landowner still maintains the property, and they want to keep it in the family. So there's different ways, I would say if there's a little ways away.
So we have an official definition of active and inactive recreation.
Passive.
Passive, I suppose Cover Bridge Park includes both.
A little bit of both, yeah.
But why don't you describe the forward to inactive, but how does it line up? I mean, you describe like getting out in nature.
That would be what Polar Ridge is intended to be.
Yeah.
Passive park, rather than it's passive space, meaning that it's not developed for kind of gathering of playground and that stuff. It's passive in the sense that you're walking through trails.
So it's like the non-playground, but the green areas of Cover Bridge Park, is that still considered active?
Well, it depends, there's sporting fields.
I consider everything east.
maybe west of the trail, like towards the mural and that kind of stuff to the butterfly garden, but then you go into active again.
Yeah, and you're back to the baseball field. The buildings can be considered somewhat passive. You know, active is really reserved for turn field for traditional sports for soccer. Just, you know, running or walking on the trail.
So what's the thought, there was something about. There was some mention in the article the interview that they wanted to be money to. They have, actually, they have provided easements, like we just approved an easement this week, so an easement so that we can build the trail through the property, so they, as a donation from them to allow us to, which is a very generous donation of them to allow us to come through the property with the trail easement. So we've obtained the trail easement. They own the property, but we have the trail easement to come through. And so they're very generous with that kind of vision. Where's that one go? The house is actually. Well, they have lots of them.
Yeah, the easement it's talking about is off the grid.
Oh, okay.
Right along the Jordan Creek, and then we also secured the easement, the Jordan. So we're almost, should have a project in the next few months for trail construction of the greenway through Covered Bridge Park, which will basically parallel River Road all the way down in between the two parks. And then once we secure the rest of the easement, like I said, we have Browning here, just getting the JRSD last week, and we're still in the school district. Trail all the way to the school. That's an additional 2 miles, right about 48 miles right now, so almost 3 miles.
We have
6
4
miles
more
if
to
you
go.
walk it.
We have 4 more to go.
Parking lot has walking.
That's what I'm saying. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I work it up.
So if it's all right, just I'm gonna move us along. I'm going to the next question, which it allows for some healthy discussion. If there are other things you disagree with around the time plan, or that you would like to flag as things that might be of area of concern about resource protection. Feel free to shout it out or write it down or.
I'll say that I said it previously at a very early town plan meeting. And I will say it again soon. Appreciate it looking at that page was with listening from the 2009 plan. And page 19, I appreciate giving some good examples that were accomplished. We have an early discussion that the staff will do a lessons learned regarding the 2009 plan. And when that was brought up, it was the first meeting Todd Poole and Scott, engineer, attended something. George was here at the time, and George said, we'll do a lessons learned at the back end of the process. Struck me a little odd because the whole work I ever did, you did a lessons learned at the beginning of the process, and then you took the learnings into account. Right? But anyway, George said we do it at the back end, and we still haven't done it. So I look forward to read a little bit more rigorous lessons learned. That's the citizen.
I think that's about things that maybe you find challenging or timeline-wise, for people that what's been done over 10 years, why we're just doing when we started. And then COVID hit.
So we started in 2019.
Yeah,
It's not been, yeah, this is not just started in 2021. we're in phase 4.
It
So-
was,
Yeah, so it has been,
2019.
COVID has kind of, it's a long, it's about normally about a 12 month process. COVID impacted the process because of stall and wanted to make sure we got. We've also had some staff turnover. With the role of community development, so yeah, we did start in 2019, but had hoped to have been wrapped up.
So one thing for me that I'm not sure, looking through the bold statements here on page 19. The ones I'm missing, it talks very, very heavy on farming information, which is great. But, you know, open space, something where, you know, there's a little bit more flexibility to it. You know, if there's an example, I believe it was in Lower Nazareth, where they had a protected farm, which is awesome. But they had a trail network and they were trying to get their trail through a little, you know, 30-foot easement of the protected property and they couldn't do it. Now, they ended up getting it done eventually, but they were coming through all types of mountains and across the township, a lot of money, legal fees. So,
Farmland is confined to just farmland preservation, so however many years down the road, if like a trail is a perfect example of
you never know.
trying to get through something and we can't. So open space preservation, flexibility adds diversity too.
Yeah. The few could be too, I mean, seeing that, you mentioned, you know, with a neighboring community of the Fairfax City of Pennsylvania, growth, you know, probably continuing to happen, you know, in the region. But, you know, 30 years from now, what if the farmers just say, done? What if nobody wants to? Then what do we do? Do we just let it go, or do we turn it into a park, or do we turn it into some other? Well, I think with, you know, preserving it as open space,
Yeah. You're not
maintain it as
developing.
open space in
Right, right.
perpetuity, but it's not so strenuous with the language. So I'm a little cautious sometimes when it comes to really being too specific.
Mhm.
Something like that, just. There could be a different, better, more appropriate use for the township. I don't know. You know, hearing some of the stories that some of the other communities do, you know, do something good to connect neighborhoods through a trail system. Yeah, they're not trying to put housing development. It's a recreational type use. But I would just be very careful of putting restrictive language to the point where there's not a little bit of flexibility for the township.
What is the restrictive language?
Farmland in and of itself, farmland preservation is.
But you could say farmland preservation for low impact recreational use. I mean,
Right,
More-
when you
more-
say farmland preservation, that's specific.
Well, okay, so when you say open space, what is that?
recreation, parks, farming.
It allows for farm. But
There's no
not,
reason you can't continue.
but not pigeonhole to specific farming. Now, the part of the farmland preservation that's attractive to the ability to fund farmland preservation and buy, you know, for property owners to receive revenue for preserving the farm.
Might be a risk if you have a township that had some farmland preserved. Or even 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 50% farmland preserved, that might be a concern. If you have a township that has 0 farmland preserved, you'd like to have a little farmland preserved.
I'm not saying that it's not appropriate. I'm just wondering, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if New York's in Jangle or whatever other farmers we have in the area are going to continue to farm it into.
And so is it more attractive for the landowner who has the right to do what they want to say, I make
generations down may not farm this, but they have the opportunity to do this, and that's appealing.
There's an interesting book.
Yeah, it's about solid Whitehall Township.
Yeah.
It's mostly like this farm with that farm and the other farm. It's all farms.
Yeah, but I know something. A lot of it's farm contracted. So there's a farmer that I frequently speak to, because I see him down. I'm sure they have put through an interest. It's family, and so they lease it out to. So you're starting to see that sort of thing.
Really, I don't, this is a road.
No, this is Stanley around here that leases it out to you.
Yeah. No, I was,
And it's some
it's like, I grew up.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, Chantal.
So just, I think we're honing in on 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. So
Good discussion.
it's a really good, I think it's so wonderful to have Renee and Renee here to just have this discussion. I think this is really what these working groups are for. And we don't, I mean, I think our next question, if we turn that over, is anything surprising? We think about what we've dove into so far. Or something that you found in read research in regards to resource protection that surprised you. Yes.
You feel that?
Yeah, but really think about
It's like wood lines, that separate our fields. You don't see it too much on here.
it. I mean, I don't think the vision is like. There are some, I mean, I think of,
Huckleberry.
no. So we're originally going to be on class for this whole.
Yep.
I think it's quite a sport. Well, that way. I think it's. I don't.
Like try-
I remember there's some with that.
Yeah, Isaac Wall, that's down there. They've done a pretty good
Go
job.
what?
Isaac Walton,
Yeah.
yeah, they've done a pretty good track plan.
Oh, yeah. Because what she's on it too.
Yeah, it's mostly roots. Yeah. And then you start getting into forest management. Making sure it's a healthy. forest.
Township is a lot further. Township.
Thank you for speaking. Director.
So, do you have anything to add? Within the next surprise stuff?
As indicated earlier, I'm surprised that after many conversations across 3+ years that our township has 0 agricultural zoning. We with Donna White separately and with Donna White present in our March 2020 meeting, the last meeting we had of our committee. I'm finding out for the first time that our zone says there is agricultural zoning. So I'm going to look into that further. That's a surprise.
If you're on the zoning portal.
Yeah,
I zoning districts.
Yeah.
Actually.
They have the
zoning
definition.
district. It will bring up a separate screen that shares everything. All
I mean, we can open up the zoning ordinance and look at our.
Just R, sorry.
So last question that we have for the discussion, what are we missing? I think we kind of, there's something we touched on, but it's under this question. Are we, did we not discuss something? Or is there a gap here? As we move forward, identify identification. You guys have from the township perspective, the citizen perspective.
That's the jump there.
Yeah, I mean, let's hear from
Yeah,
obviously the citizen led.
This is just a very general. I mean, I think this is a great conversation. We talked about it from the resource protection standpoint. I think a little bit earlier, Mrs. Armstrong made or Sherwood made a comment from the other perspective. I'm concerned about what all this development is going to do. So aside from those two comments, which certainly appreciate, I don't think this group talked so much about as this township is built out. Since maybe it won't be as much as some of the numbers indicate, but as the township is built out, how's that going to consume the resources we want to protect? I mean, we're talking about from this direction, right? From the other direction, how do we actually keep that from consuming? I mean, that was a very general thought, but at the end of the day, Renee's right. At the end of the day, we're going to update that map.
I mean, I think that's what this is leading to is where are those areas
Yeah.
that you don't want to see this.
I mean, since I learned that some time ago, I thought, talking about the complex, rubber meets the road on the zoning. What the decisions that are made on what the future zoning.
Business.
Yes.
So, yeah, so it's been thinking about how, like, it goes after what you're saying, the comp plan will direct where, it's broader, but it gives zoning the power to, for the representative. Yeah, so the way the MPCs, right, is comp plan, zoning, and official map.
Yeah, so the NPC, that's how we develop this.
Any final thoughts for us, like, maybe, and I know, giving up a lot of your.
What did we talk about that you wanted to talk?
More people that come to that one call. Or car. Trails or getting used. Or resources. Okay. Textbook. You did. We don't know. Okay, go someplace where there's not as much stuff.
On traffic.
Or yeah. When we have fun.
Randy, want to move from the finger Montana to the office of the Parks and Recreation?
We'll get stuck fishing and coming to.
I know we're at 7:30, so one of the things we'll be doing, or I'll be doing as a facilitator, is taking, putting out some key takeaways. The start of our meeting, if we have any commission, we'll list the takeaways that will prioritize. just as a group, see where we're at. And where kind of, and I think it will help the Whitehall Planning Commission in what information they'll be providing. Because they obviously, they kind of work so much work in all these aspects, and they have the regional perspective. In this way, but I think it'll be a really important. Really lucky that. No, I definitely think that could rather.
She is the executive director of the planning commission, but she is a fabulous resource.
So that will be the focus of next week. We'll hear from them, but that will be like this, will be a discussion, which we can read over some of the questions we have, but the purpose is to get us to a place where with the assistant, and then we have a planning commission will start to identify some of the recommendations that then in the third meeting will build out with this. So, well, we really appreciate your time. For seeing you next week. Very much. If you can, well, it'll be virtual.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
When you go into one of the meetings,
Do you have a chair about?
So,